Hi, this is Scott Wheeler. I'm back. This time I'm talking about what I call the Welk belt. I've set up a playlist on this channel, Lawrence Welk Tributes, for this. It's kind of overlaps with my series that I'm making called my Lawrence Welk Across America series. There's overlap, but it's different because I think what I want to do with the Welk belt is for one thing, I'm going to explain what that is in a moment, but I want that probably to be examples of where I've been able to, through my efforts at reaching out to lawmakers, organizations, and others, had some success at getting some kind of support, or even if it's like from the media in a neutral way, coverage is either neutral or positive towards my efforts about honoring Lawrence Welk and the Lawrence Welk Show and Myron Florin during this year, the 70th anniversary of the show's national debut. To me, I mean, if you think about certain phrases that are already out in society, like the Borscht Belt, which I want to say has to do with parts of New York State and maybe parts of Eastern Pennsylvania, or the Bible Belt, which is obviously associated with much of the South, for example, like evangelicals and so forth, very conservative part of the country. The term belt is often applied to perhaps groups or viewpoints that are especially represented now or in the past in certain parts of the country. And to me, I think that the Midwest, being where Mr. Welk, Mr. Florin, many of the people from the Lawrence Welk Show are from, the polka, in addition to other parts of the country, I would think especially in the Midwest in the past, polka was like the heartbeat for Midwest was the heartbeat for polka music. And that's one of the first genres that Lawrence Welk became famous for performing and associated with. And being from North Dakota, that's where his love of music was first learned and developed. And that's where some of his first performances were. South Dakota helped get him Midwestern name recognition, because when he lived in Yankton, South Dakota, he was able to perform regularly on a well-known radio station there. I'm going to name that in a future video. I think it's WNAX. I just don't want to get it wrong. And so these are some examples. And then when he was in Omaha, Nebraska, I believe in his biography, he says that it was there that a priest encouraged him to continue on with his musical career because he was having doubts about if he should keep going on with it. And this was before the show went forward. So you could say that one priest in the Midwestern state of Nebraska, at least to an important extent, or was a factor in what became a large, long-running national television show, very popular in its time. So I believe that the Midwest, because of so many people from the show, including him being from there, much of the music that the show's known for would be associated with rural farming communities or polka or things like that. It makes sense that the Midwest would be the heartland of the Welk Belt, the heartbeat of it. And I'm honored, having Midwestern heritage myself from Wisconsin, my father's side of the family, that I can appeal to those personal roots when I'm reaching out in that part of the country. I mean, I've been to Wisconsin before, I think a couple of other Midwestern states, but in terms of like on the ground, I've never been in the middle of the country, that part of the Midwest, because the Midwest goes from Ohio all the way to Western North Dakota, South Dakota, and so forth. So it's a pretty wide range. So I've been in parts of it, but much of it I still have yet to experience it in person. I've relied on knowing people from there, seeing pictures, shows, movies, so forth. I want to develop a more personal experience, though, because when I was in Wisconsin over the years, I've loved it. To me, I remember when I was 15, if I can tell you something personal, not related to Mr. Welk for a moment. I remember when I was 15 and I went up there for a family reunion. It wasn't my first trip, but it was the first trip there that I remember much more vividly, because I was about 4 or 5 the first time I went there. And I guess it was like early in the year or towards the end of a year. It was like wintertime. And there's a few patchy memories I have of that trip. But one of the ones that stands out the most is that I couldn't believe that I had mittens on and my hands were still cold. Being from Florida, born and raised, that was an unusual experience. And maybe the only time, or one of the only times in my life today still, where I've been up north during that time of year. And it's very different. It's almost like a different country because of that. And I noticed some cultural differences. Accents are different. some of the geography in certain areas is different. For example, where I live now in North Florida, there's some hills, but growing up in Central Florida, it seems like it was much more flat, where in Wisconsin, there's some flatness, but there are also some very steep hills. I tell you, one time I was on a back road up there, and the difference between what was level here and what was level way down below that was so steep that when you were driving forward, if you didn't know that there's going to be road ahead, you could easily think you're going to drive off a cliff. And so I value, that's one of the things I mentioned about accents in one of the recent videos on this channel, is I value regional accents. I like the regional variation in geography and in nature. I mean, I don't like the idea of being a frozen popsicle in wintertime, but we live in a time where a lot of work can be done near a fireplace or with the heater running in the house. With the internet, there's so much you can do from home. And so I'd like to think that if I ever had the chance to live in the Midwest, that it'd be a lot easier to stick it out during the winter. But I think that if I had the means, I would want to have a place in Florida, like in the winter months, and then the rest of the year, maybe spend up north, or some kind of 6 months, or 8 months, 4 months. You get the point. So I love both parts of the country, the South and the Midwest, very much from personal experience. I'm very familiar with the South, obviously, but I do enjoy the Midwest. I feel kind of like they're cousins or siblings to the South culturally and geographically, because if you look at a map of the United States, you have the Southeast over here, and then you got like parts of the Midwest north of it, bordering it to the north, and then bordering it to the west. And so they're sort of like brothers or cousins to us, similar but different. And we're all Americans. And so there's a lot of overlap, common language, a lot of common history, although within the historical periods, there are certain differences. But yeah, so it's almost like the South and the Midwest encompass much of my own personal background. And I mean, Pennsylvania is part of the Northeast, so that's an important part too, but I think you get the point by now. But yeah, so the Welk Belt idea is to focus on parts of the country that I feel were historically areas where he had a lot of support and interest and were important to his life. But I also think that there's room to modify the Welk Belt, because there might be patches of the Midwest that are less rural now, or less focused on tradition, or maybe there have been some cultural changes in parts of the Midwest where maybe they'll be open in the future to revisiting what 60 years ago might have been valued in that particular patch. But right now, the interest isn't as immediate. And so that could be offset for right now, going to parts of the United States that maybe weren't as deeply connected originally when the show was on and so forth, but today could be more so, because like Florida, for example, for my whole lifetime, a lot of people have moved here from the Midwest and other parts of the country. California is where the show aired from, and we've had a lot of people move here from California. And so these are some examples of what I'm talking about. Is Florida's not where the show was made. He wasn't from here, but we have a lot of people that grew up in parts of the country that may have been part of the original Welk Belt. And so we can have Florida and perhaps some of the other southern states have deeper connections, make inroads in that part of the country, maybe parts out west as well. And then maybe some parts, sadly, of the Midwest might be a little bit rusty. Maybe there's some holes in the metaphorical ceiling in certain parts of the Midwest where, as I say, when my parents were growing up, people liked the show in some of these cities or parts of the Midwest, but today the interest just isn't there. But on the other hand, I have come across people in the Midwest that remember the show and like it, still watch it. So some things are in flux, some things change in general. Politics, you look at the two major political parties and their coalitions have changed over time. And like I was saying about people moving, some people might be born in one part of the country and then retire somewhere else. So Welk Belt, I would think, will have continuity with its past and its origins going back roughly 100 years now to today. But then there might be places that sadly have faded away. It might be harder to get back in that area. But then there might be places, for example, in Florida, there might be communities that in the 80s, 70s, 60s either didn't exist, or maybe 50 people live there, but now thousands live there. They've exploded in population. And so that's an opportunity to fill in some of those other gaps, with spackle, so to speak. You might have a Midwestern patch that needs some spackle, and you can go to Florida and fill it in some of those spots. And that can also perhaps strengthen the coalition and the friendship and the goodwill between the two regions. And as I say, this is a national effort. I want to reach out to all 50 states, get support in all 50 states from individuals, viewers, lawmakers, organizations, and so forth. But it just seems to me at this time, based on what I know about the show, some of my own experiences this year with my project, that the Midwest seems to be the starting point, one of the strongholds. But if you read the biography, Arizona was a moment in his life that stood out. I think there was a place in Phoenix I'm going to talk about in the future. And so we might want to try and build that up some more. But let me get to another video. I want to read a proclamation that I got. I meant to make the video Thursday, but I never got to it. So I'm going to go to that next. Thank you for watching. Take care. If you like this video, please click the like button. If you're not yet subscribed, please subscribe to Lawrence Welk Tributes, the YouTube channel. And I would appreciate if you would share the videos from this channel with others and the channel. Tell people about both. And I would appreciate comments being left on the videos. And I also have an email for my project, which is the 70th anniversary at gmail.com. And so if you feel comfortable publicly through a comment on these videos, or if you feel more comfortable privately through email, please share with me your memories of the show. If you have any experiences meeting him or anybody else that was on the show, I'd like to know about that. Feel free to let me know where you're from, as in not your address, but like your city or your state, or if you're from another country, even what country, because my understanding is in part of Canada, they still show repeats of the show. And I think people from Lawrence Welk Show have also performed in Canada, so that might be a place where it wouldn't be a total surprise, like maybe in the prairies or something like that. But yeah, it's interesting to know who I'm reaching on YouTube with these videos, and it would be interesting to know who these people know, because you're in for a surprise when you try to start a project as to who will be interested, who won't be. I mean, I could talk about this on another video. There's been places and to some extent people that I thought would have been more eager to help me that haven't been. So, writing back or enthusiastic or whatever. But then there's been other people that maybe I'd never heard of before, or places that I didn't think would be as much in the center of the project that have really stepped up and provided some leadership, like in the beginning, January, February, March, and later. And so it's been a surprise. And I would think politics to some extent is like that too, where you have certain goals and expectations, but sometimes you have to make changes along the way. And you can say that about life as well. You're growing up, you have certain ideas about your life, and then you find out for one reason or another, it's not going to entirely turn out that way, for better or for worse. So it's been an interesting journey so far, and I intend to keep going at least until July 2nd of next year, because the air date originally nationally for the show is July 2nd, 1955. July 2nd, I think, is Wednesday this coming week. So that'll be the actual 70th anniversary date. But because a year is 12 months, I'm stretching this out from July 2nd, 2025 all the way to about July 2nd, 2026. And then once the anniversary is over, I might try to find other ways to be involved at getting the show and the man and everything like that recognized and respected. But I think 70th anniversary is especially a relevant time because of that anniversary. Anniversaries are a good time in general, for whether you're talking about weddings or historical events like the bicentennial or other things like that. There's something about the symbolism of a specific date or a year that I think can make it easier to get people's interest or their attention, or birthdays for that matter. So thank you for watching and take care.